Broadcasting from the Cass Corridor in Detroit, it's the Metro, WDET's daily news and culture show. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. Today on the program, Americans spend lots of time on TikTok.
They use it to stay connected to like-minded people, to learn about new ways of thinking.
What the kids are saying, how they're dancing, what they're listening to.
And things like social movements and world conflicts that might be grappling headlines.
We get to hear from people on the ground directly affected.
But TikTok's future is on the chopping block. Federal lawmakers have been pushing to ban it because of its Chinese owners.
We'll talk about some of the potential consequences of a TikTok ban and how you feel about it.
But first, how many of you added read more to your New Year's resolution list? I did. I feel attacked just a little bit, but it's okay.
Same.
But whether you're reading nonfiction, sci-fi, or an autobiography, it can be challenging to develop a rhythm and stay consistent, especially if you don't read regularly. Sometimes we need a little help, a person or group to share our thoughts and reflections, and to keep us on track. Developing a kind of reading community to support our goals might be just the motivation we all need.
Yes, Tia, we need some community readers. That brings us to Source Booksellers. It's a lot more than just a bookstore. They provide programming and author discussions so avid readers can connect with new readers. It might be the kind of programming that'll get you to finish that book you started a while ago and haven't touched maybe in weeks or months, or to start a new one. Janet Webster Jones and Allison Jones Turner are the owners of Source Booksellers. They're here to get us ready to read. Janet and Allison, welcome back to the Metro.
Yes, thank you very much.
So, Janet, first, I'm always struck by the kinds of books I find in the store. I'm reading one I picked up at Source called We Could Have Been Friends, and it's by Raja Shahada. The author is Palestinian, and it's about his relationship with his father amid the ongoing battle for Palestinian human rights. And the photo on the cover of the book reminded me of my own father, so I had to pick it up. How do you determine which books make it to the shelves? What's the criteria?
Well, first of all, we are an independent bookstore, one of a family of independent bookstores in metropolitan Detroit. We're part of a group of people who try to find our way into the community where we sit, and we look to the community to teach us what to do. Yes, we choose books carefully and we curate well so that we look at all of the groups who have come through Detroit and to Detroit and are in Detroit and their histories, their culture, and so on. So we pick carefully that way. We also have the assistance of our sales representatives, our people that write about books, our publishers, and customers who come in and say, wow, we really think this would be good in your store. So it's a two-way street.
So you have your ear on the street.
That's right.
Could you talk about the different types of events you host? For example, you host conversations with authors, but you also host book readings. Are there other kinds of events that you all are doing to bring the community together?
Yeah, Allison's going to talk a little bit about that, but I also want to say that we work very hard to be in touch with all of the literary communities, the libraries, the schools, organizations that support books, companies that want to give books to their employees. So there are lots of ways that we are embedded in the community and help to stretch the community in their literary life.
So I guess our events that are coming up kind of highlight the three ways we can give events. So tonight we're hosting a YA author, Sarah Regley, for her, The Queens of Spade, and it is a historical novel. It is a story set with Queen Victoria. It's a fantastic. The author is an English professor and a public intellectual, and so this is going to be virtual. So anyone can attend. It's a free event. You can be into her series Bones of Ruin or not and still enjoy it. On Sunday, we're going to be hosting our annual Martin Luther King Jr. Day story time. And so this year we're going to be using the book Rosa from the late poet and writer Nikki Giovanni. In that book, it talks about Rosa Parks. experience with Martin Luther King.
We're going to get to that actually in a minute.
Okay.
Yes, we are going to get there. But first, I wonder if you could just talk about how you select books that you shape events around. What are you thinking about? So, of course, we're going to get to the fact that it's about to be MLK's birthday. And so that obviously is a very timely event that we will discuss in a moment. But what are some of the other pieces of criteria that you're using to select a book?
If we feel that the information is either timely or important to our community, we want to bring the author, if we can, to the city in all the ways that we could, virtually, in person, or through a story time.
And a lot of times we have a chance to go off-site to an event. For example, we had Wimpy Kid, the author of Wimpy Kid, and we were at the Senate Theater out on Michigan Avenue and blew the theater out of the water because there were so many people and children there that the owner had to come and pop popcorn. I don't know if that's really true, but he did. But they had to open up the popcorn stand and so on. So we seek ways of getting into the community, and we seek ways to bring knowledge, information, and understanding to the people in the community, because the community is also us. We're not separate from the community. And then we figure out ways to have people know what they don't know. For example, books that are about time periods that are not now. I've been reading big fat biographies, for example, and I'm now ready to talk about Captain Cook.
Oh, okay.
Right. And
One
who he was.
one piece of info on Captain Cook for all of us that will surprise us all.
Yes, one piece of info is
Yeah.
that he was doing this during the American Revolution. So he was an explorer, a archaeologist, a captain of these 3 voyages that went around the world, and specifically around Cape Horn of southern Africa and into the Pacific. And it is so exciting to read about this and to read about the people he encountered and how he admired them for what they learned to do that they didn't know in England.
Wow. History is one of our favorite topics here on the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. We're discussing ways to connect with our community through books and literature with Allison Jones-Turner and Janet Webster-Jones of Source Booksellers. Allison, now you were talking just a little bit earlier about the special Martin Luther King Jr. Talk that's going to be happening. You all are going to be using Rosa by Nikki Giovanni. We talked a little bit about Nikki Giovanni and the life and legacy of who she was here on the Metro a few weeks ago when she passed away. And just wanted to talk a little bit about that event and the importance of recognizing the 60th anniversary of the Selma Marches, March of 1965, which is just 60 years of it.
Yeah.
So can you talk about the importance of extending that information to more generations?
Well, we chose this book for the story time because it's definitely a nod to the contribution of Nikki Giovanni, but it's also talks about Rosa Parks together with Martin Luther King in their experience in the South, but there's a beautiful, beautiful piece in the book about the Selma March, and so that also brings that history into light. And it's the 60th anniversary, and I believe it's going to be celebrated in a wonderful way.
And we just have to remember that Rosa Parks lived the better part of her adult life here in Detroit.
Yes.
And was very much a part of the community as well as making the community strong at the same time.
And just thinking about that, once again, you hear 60th anniversary. There are human beings, people right now, 60 years old, walking around, and so much has changed since that moment, since that time. So can you talk about why the bookshop is a special place to hold these kinds of events and to have these conversations about the intersection of literature and social movements?
Well, frequently we are called a third place, if you know that concept, that people have their home, their work, and another place where they go to have community. And so we think of ourselves that way, and we think of people who come to the store, but we also think of ourselves as going out of the store to meet people where they are, which is how we really started. And so the bookstore has, I think, a reputation for being welcoming and open to people who come in. It's amazing how many people come to the store who are from other places in the country and the world. We had someone from New Zealand not long ago, and there's somebody was in from Switzerland, which I just was so thrilled with because I love what Switzerland does with climate and ecology and transportation and housing.
They're on the cutting
just so
edge.
far ahead of where we're thinking. So it's a place that I enjoy going to because I go there every day. But I love it because we never know what joy is going to come in our door, and we're pleased for that.
And we're really open for rich conversation, and just trying to understand our world better together.
Yeah, and thinking of it being a third space in this place where people can come and connect with one another, I think about just the vast amount of people that walk through these particular streets and through Midtown in the college campus that we're on, because we're seeing so many different people just based on being on Wayne State's campus. Mm-hmm. So if you could just talk about that third space and how it's able to thrive because we have so many unique folk coming through from all walks of life, especially going through Wayne State University's campus. Allison, we're going to start with you. Janet, we're going to go to you afterwards. Allison?
The unique space.
Yeah.
We definitely welcome the students when they come in, and are always happy to support with books, professors or anything. Wayne State University Press. Yeah. We've had just a wonderful time with them last year and before that, and we continue our partnership with them.
Yeah, Janet. Sure.
So we have what we call the one-card discount. We're part of that program that Wayne University established a long time ago, and we just keep doing it, and every now and then they call and see if we still want to do it, which is funny. So just yesterday, a young woman came in from New York, and she's seeking to go to College for Creative Studies here in Detroit, and she is so happy to be in Detroit. She says, I can't believe the people are so nice. I said, well, yes, we're nice. Yes. We're nice here, and we don't have to bump shoulders as you do in New York. So the variety of people that come to the store represents, I think, a microcosm of who we are as Americans. We have all kinds and sorts of people. The young woman was in one time who was Palestinian. She says, I don't like these books. They don't say what I want to say. I said, well, go and write one for yourself. And I think she did.
Oh, wow.
Yes, because if you don't have find what you want to have and can't do it at the library or somewhere, then put down what you want. So we're getting a lot of people who are writing now. I think we've had a lot of people who are wanting to read and find out new things. And because of that, writing is coming to a high pitch as well. So we have journals that are guided journals or plain journals for people to practice their writing or do their writing skills. The other thing we try to encourage people to do is not to be overwhelmed by reading. Don't think you have to sit down and cuddle up and read a whole book at one time. 3 pages a day is a good rule, because if you read 3 pages every day, you'll get through a big fat book, which I have even learned that myself as I've been reading.
And before I let both of you go, it can be challenging nowadays to get young people to read, especially when they have access to so much information. You've been hearing we're going to be talking about TikTok today. Mm-hmm. So they just have access to so many different things. So, any tips for how adults can get the kids in their lives to read a little more? I love the tip you just gave, Janet, about just 3 pages a day. So any other tips, Alice and Janet?
Well, I think it's really
read deep in your interest.
Yes.
If you're interested in something, read all that you can in that genre, and find joy in it. Find how it connects with other genres, but definitely read a lot in whatever you're interested in.
And read everything. Read everywhere. Listen to books on audio. Read TikTok, read wherever that interest is, and then you'll gain other interests along with that. And we don't have to make them read. We can make them have interests.
Yes. Thank you. That actually helps me a lot, because sometimes I'm reading books or picking up a book and I think I should probably read something a little bit more hefty or a little bit more. But, I like a sci-fi book. I like a nice dark horror book. So it's just just read what you like.
Definitely. And there is there has been a lot of energy in book talk. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people have found out about books and begun to love books because of that.
Yes.
So
yes, book talk is one of my favorite sources as well. I love that so much.
That keeps us on our toes too.
Yes, and before one more time before I let you go, how can someone participate in the events? Are they ticketed, and where can people go?
There are 2 ways. The link in our bio in Instagram. Our link tree, that's our link tree. Or there's an image on sourcebooksellers.com that you can click, and then the events will come up. Most events are free. We have a few ticketed events. They come with a book. Nice. If they are ticketed, they come with a book. But we often just have events for the public.
We also have a QR code on the window, and it's always telling you what's going on.
So if you walk by, you could just go.
QR code, that's even better. Just walking on by. Janet Webster Jones and Allison Jones Turner own Source Booksellers in Detroit and Midtown. Thank you so much for joining us on the Metro. We look forward to having you back soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
From the WDET newsroom, State Senate Minority Leader Eric Nesbitt will seek the Republican nomination for governor. The Detroit News reports the Southwest Michigan lawmaker is the first person from either major party to declare their candidacy.
The Lions will play the Commanders on Saturday in the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. Washington beat the Buccaneers in Tampa, while the Lions had a first-round bye. Lions running back David Montgomery injured his knee against the Bills a month ago and was feared lost for the season. However, he chose to avoid surgery and will play on Saturday. Campbell hinted both guard Kevin Zeitler and cornerback Terrion Arnold are trending toward playing. Both had leg injuries in the win over the Vikings. I am super excited.
Go Lions.
Go Lions.
Coming up at 11, should TikTok be banned in the U.S.? How worried are you about China spying on you? What about your data from other social media apps? We're taking your calls. The number is 313-577-1019.
Up next, we'll learn how one organization is helping the city's young people find healthy ways to resolve conflicts and center peace and equity in their lives. Stay right there. Welcome back to the Metro on 1019 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. When you grow up around violence and conflict, it becomes easy to see it as a solution to your problems. That fallacy is a complex one to unlearn. Peace Players Detroit works with young people to show them there are different options, that conflict resolution can be creative, kind, and nonviolent. The organization operates in different parts of the world where seemingly intractable conflicts persist, from the Middle East and Northern Ireland to right here in Detroit.
Yeah, the Detroit chapter of Peace Players works with young people to help erase the cultural, ethnic, and racial lines that often divide us. Now, Peace Players Detroit is teaming up with the Pistons to give young people more ways to rethink conflict resolution. Here to discuss all of that is Jasmine Cooper. She's the director of Peace Players Detroit. Jasmine, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Awesome. And I always love to ask folks when they're on the show, are you from the city of Detroit?
Absolutely. Born and raised.
What side?
East side.
East side?
East side. I'm an East Sider.
Yes. And I always love to have the East Side represented on the show because oftentimes the West Side gets a lot of love, and I'm a West Sider myself, so I can say that.
Yeah, the West Siders get it carried away a little bit.
We do.
Gotta balance it out.
I'm not going. We do. So, Jasmine, you like to invoke a quote by Frederick Douglass. It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. Talk about how this notion informs the work that you all do with Peace Players Detroit. I love that quote.
Absolutely, yes. It's a quote that I definitely live by. And so how we invoke that and infuse that in the programming that we do at Peace Players is really be intentional about the adults that we bring around these young people, and make sure that they know that they're supported, that they have a safe space to just come and just allow whatever it is that they have going on in their outside worlds to just kind of take a pause while they're in our programming, and just really make sure that we're taking time to nurture and just cultivate the young people that we come around in a positive way.
And when I think about that, and I think about intentional, when we're the adults in the situation, we control a lot of what's happening, who's around the kids. So if you could just go into the intentional portion of that and why so much of that matters when you're the adult in the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when I mean intentional, I mean our staff is in the office a few days out the week, spending hours and hours talking through our curriculum, actually simulating our curriculum, doing professional development, training, making sure we're intentional about communicating with families of our children that are participants, and just making sure on our end we have the tools and resources to be able to then go into programming and pour into our young people. And so intentionality goes such a long way with Peace Players.
And speaking of Peace Players, especially the Detroit chapter, give us just a little bit of a rundown about what you all are, who you all are, and some of the things that you all do.
Absolutely. And you all prefaced it pretty well. That was a really great introduction of just the organization. But you talked about our work that we do not only nationally, but just internationally and globally. And so Peace Players was formed in 2001 in South Africa, actually. Wow. And so, and so then it opened programming in Cyprus and Northern Ireland and in Israel. And then in 2017, Nike brought us to the U.S. as a part of their equality campaign. And Peace Players Detroit was actually one of the first 3 cities in the U.S., Detroit, Brooklyn, and Baltimore. And now we're in Los Angeles and Chicago. And so while each of our cities in the U.S. are plagued with different conflicts or issues around their communities, in Detroit, I think, which is extremely culturally diverse place, I believe. I think a lot of people are separated and segregated into their own silos, whether it be for economic reasons, whether it be for race, whether it be for whatever reasons. And so what Peace Players is really trying to do in the Detroit area is bridge divides, create cross-communal connections, and really use sport as a tool to teach young people leadership development, conflict resolution, self-awareness, how to, infuse inside-out transformation, and be the change that they wish to see, and exhibit the behaviors and qualities of what it takes to be just contributing agents in our society. And so what we do in Detroit is we're in currently 4 different districts in the city. Detroit is broken up into 7 community districts. We're in 4 out of the 7 with the goal of becoming all 7. And we do programming within those communities, right? But then we also have quarterly cross-communal programming that we call twinnings, that we do at least 4 times a year. And so, that's how we kind of just bit by bit trying to break down these divides and just make it all one Detroit, right? No East Side, West Side, just one Detroit.
You took I was going to say number 1, twinning. That is so social media. I love that so much when you said that. But the divide that we all experience in the city of Detroit is so stark when you're driving through the city and you go to a certain community or area and you can already tell that you're in a new place. You feel like you're in a new place.
Absolutely.
And having that connection, having that interpersonal communication that needs to happen is very important. And you are in specific areas, some of the areas on the west side that I'm actually really familiar with. Brightmoor is one of the ones that I grew up right around. Southwest Detroit as well. So could you talk about those particular communities that you guys are in and how you all have cultivated them into leaders in that particular, like what are some of those programs you're using to cultivate those young people into leaders?
Absolutely. So so the 4 communities that we are serving currently, the Brightmoor community, Cody Rouge, Osborne community.
I'm from Cody Rouge, by the way. That's where I grew up.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Osborne community in Southwest Detroit, like you said. And so demographically, some of those communities are different. Right? And so the programming that we offer, we have 2 types of programming that's year round. It's called our Peace League program. and our leadership development program. Our Peace League program is something that we do in partnership with the Detroit Public Schools. So we're actually inside of the schools in those communities, and we go to the schools. It's an after-school program, and we do our program in there 3 days a week at the schools that we're partnered with. And our leadership development program, which is a pipeline, right, a continuation of our Peace League, is for high school students, but it's not at a school. It's at a community center in those communities. So that way, some kids, when they matriculate from the middle school age, they may go to different high schools, but we want to create this pipeline where they can continue to grow through our program. So we do the high school age programs at community centers, same cadence, a few times a week. And so our program is really, don't tell the kids, hopefully none of them are listening, but we really use basketball as a tool. I usually say trick, but I'm going to say tool to bring young people into programming. It's a non-competitive basketball. We don't play games or, have tournaments or anything like that, but we use it in a way, just meeting young people where they're at, to be intentional. And we do curriculum activities every day. And that's really an activity that's fun and engaging. It's like disguised learning. And so they'll do an activity, and then afterwards, it's when we have the dialogue, they're like, oh, that's what that is. Oh, this is how I diffuse conflict. Oh, this is how it relates to my life. And so it's really just this energetic program, and that's fun, but also very intentional and disguised learning. And so, we do that. And then also our summer program is, we do that in the summer. It's 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, and we infuse math and ELA in the mornings. And then in the afternoons, we do our traditional what we call Peace Players program, and it's combined with field trips and different experience and opportunities as well.
This using basketball, especially right now in time, we're talking about TikTok, but Angel Reese, he's having this effect on young girls. Yes. And right now we're seeing just all the young NBA players that are coming up, Kate Cunningham being one of them, who's really, really impacting the young people right now. So it's great that you are here talking about that. This is The Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. We're speaking with Jasmine Cooper, who leads Peace Players Detroit, about how that organization is cultivating young leaders in the city. Now, Peace Players Detroit is collaborating with the Pistons. We've been talking about this, about how basketball is a tool, a trick.
Yes. A tool to adults, a trick to the
earmuffs to the kids listening right now.
Yeah.
So what does that collaboration entail?
Oh, so just in general, Pistons and Peace Players have been partners since 2017. Arn Tellum from the Detroit Pistons, he is actually an active member on the Peace Players Global Board. And so he was very adamant about Peace Players coming to Detroit. And so since our inception in Detroit, the Pistons have been great thought partners, great leaders in our space. And so we've collaborated with them over the years on various projects and programming. And so recently we've come together to partner on a program that we call Pistons for Peace, that we also brought in the Detroit Police Department Neighborhood Police Officers Program in as well. And so that program is centered around, it's a 6-week program that's once a week at the Pistons Performance Center. And it's a small group of young men and women, about 25. And it's really centered around conflict resolution, inside out transformation, mental awareness, and a lot of different things. And really just trying to have an intimate, safe space with Peace Players, the Detroit Police Department, and really just creating this community. And so it's been really great. And shout out to Malik Beasley. He's the ambassador of the program, and he was actually there yesterday the entire time. And it was just amazing.
So when you talk about collaborating with the police, we know police can spark a lot of fear and anxiety in some of the communities that you're working in. I'm thinking about Latino kids who might come from, let's say, mixed immigration status households, or Black kids who may feel unsafe overall around police. So how do you approach those kinds of worries?
No, that's great. That's a great point. And I think that's why this program is so important, because the police officers and shout out to D-Rob from Neighborhood Police Officers. He's kind of the leader of that program. But the police officers have been so down to earth, so vulnerable, so authentic, so organic, so hands-on. And so I think some of the stigmas or fears that our young people may have when you just talk about law enforcement, I think that guard and that wall has been kind of removed in this program, and everybody's in there in this complete vulnerable state. The officers are in there doing skits with us. They're a part of the disguise learning. They're part of the fun, but they're also a part of honesty. They give their full honest opinions, and they speak up, and the kids have accepted it very well and received it very well so far. And so I'm excited to see how it can continue to impact them.
Sounds like maybe it's breaking down some power dynamics in a good way.
Absolutely. And I think, kudos to the neighborhood police officer program, because a lot of times when you're in power, right, and when you're in this law enforcement lens, you may feel like you can't break that down. And so they have come in there first showing and demonstrating like, hey, we're just people in this space that happen to have a badge. And so like they come to the kids in that sense.
Jasmine, you have mentioned that Peace Players, we're talking about this from a very local angle, the Detroit Police and the Pistons, but it is an international organization. Could you talk about some of the strategies that seem to work with young people on a universal level, whether it's kids in Northern Ireland or Detroit?
Absolutely. I think universally what works with Peace Players is our curriculum. Is the foundation of it is an arbinger, which is rooted in seeing people as people and not as objects or as obstacles or things. And so the iceberg theory is the foundation of it, right? Really, when you see an iceberg on the top, you see a piece of it. But then underneath an iceberg, it's so much bigger. And I don't know if people notice, it's so much larger than what you kind of see. And so the foundation, whether it's in Northern Ireland or the Middle East or our programming in South Africa or the U.S. and all the other cities, the foundation is, okay, there's so much on the surface beyond what we can see about people. And so how do we treat people as just themselves and take in everything that they bring underneath that we don't see and create this cross-global, community around that root? And so I think that's what makes Peace Players so unique. And I think that's what makes our global exchanges so successful. We've had some exchanges in the Middle East and South Africa that we were able to actually take 6 young people from Detroit to both of those global exchanges. So yeah, I think, yes, that's the foundation of it.
And just listening to you talk about this right now, Jasmine, we can see the passion off of you. We can hear it. Like, you're being rewarded by this just as much as the kids are being rewarded.
Absolutely.
So talk about that a little bit, because I just want to tap into this passion you have. Like it says a lot when you have people who are intentional about being in place where they want to be. So, talk about this experience for yourself.
Absolutely. And so it's funny because at the Pistons for Peace yesterday session, I gave them an organic testimony of something I experienced yesterday where I had to exhibit inside out transformation to kind of stop a conflict that could have arose and grew bigger. And so I think for me, I learned from the young people. I learned from our core values, because how can I teach young people about, culture of collaboration, seeing people as people, inside out transformation, if I myself don't exhibit those, qualities? And so I learned so much from this program, from our curriculum, and from being able to teach it to young people that it's changed my life. It's changed the people around me, because I'm constantly trying to, infuse it into my friends and family as well. And so it's definitely changing. And I think the sentiments are the same for our entire staff, that this program, it not only changes the young people, but the adults that are invested in it as well.
Jasmine Cooper is the director of Peace Players Detroit. It helps young people to grow into leaders and center peace and equity in their lives. Jasmine, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro. We will definitely have you back.
Absolutely. I would love to come back, and appreciate all the work that you all are doing here just to bring awareness to all the many great things going on in the Metro Detroit area.
Yes.
From the WDET Newsroom. Former Detroit City Council President Santiel Jenkins announced her candidacy for mayor of Detroit yesterday. Jenkins currently serves as the CEO of the Heat and Warmth Fund, or THAW. She says she plans to invest in public transit, after-school programs, and community centers. Jenkins says she'll also put a focus on safer neighborhoods. The current City Council President, Mary Sheffield, announced her candidacy last month. Others are also looking into running.
Coming up at 11, should TikTok be banned in the U.S.? How worried are you about China having access to your personal data? We're taking your calls. The number is 313-577-1019 as well. Up next, Michigan needs more homes, and in some areas of the region, Metro Detroit's sprawl just keeps sprawling. We'll talk about the growth of the exurbs in Southeast Michigan. That's next on the Metro.
On WDET, I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. Housing affordability has become a problem, and it's showing up in so many places. The city of Detroit has too many homes in need of repair. The suburbs don't have enough multifamily units because America hasn't invested public dollars in housing construction in a big way since the 90s. Housing prices are too high for too many people, and folks are feeling the pressure of those prices in cities, suburbs, and rural areas alike.
That's right, Tia. But in Southeast Michigan, there are a few places where home construction is growing a little faster. That's the so-called exurbs. Lyon, Milford, and Commerce Townships, all sitting just northwest of Plymouth, recorded some of the highest numbers of housing permits last year. So why is home construction happening the most in Detroit's exurbs? I'm still having issues saying, or like thinking about this word, exurbs. It still feels so wacky and weird. And what can the denser parts of Southeast Michigan do to increase home building? To discuss this, we have Jeanette Schneider here. She's the president of the RE/MAX of Southeastern Michigan, a real estate firm. Jeanette, welcome to the Metro.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
So why is home building so hot in places like Lyon, Commerce, and Milford?
I think there's probably a couple of reasons for that. I mean, first of all, they have land. And if you're going to build, you have to go where there is available land. And the land that they have available tends to be vacant. So you're not having to rezone. You're not having to go back and undo, maybe something else that was there. So, I think that's the first thing is just availability. The other thing you do have to look at is you obviously have communities that are interested in doing this. They're interested in seeing development. They're working with developers. And so I think those two things combined right now in those areas are helping to spur that growth.
Now, you recently moved to Commerce. Tell us why you did that. What was appealing about that to you?
Well, in a word, a lake.
That's fair.
We had lived in Northville for 19 years. And before that, Novi, and before that, Livonia. So we've kind of been in that corridor for many years. And we have both, my husband and I, over the last few years, have lost our dads. And so now we have widowed moms that live in Saginaw and Frankenmuth. And we decided that, it doesn't look as though retirement is going to allow us to go someplace else. When that day comes, I'm not ready to do that yet. But if we're going to be staying in Michigan, then why don't we go where we really would enjoy life? And we got a boat during COVID, a small little boat. We wanted to be on a lake. And so we start taking a look. And that was, a big driving point. But that being said, the other driving point would be is we absolutely love the feel of the area. We absolutely love the mature trees, the walking trails, the nature. There's so many parks and recs and easy access to do outdoor activities, biking, walking, any of that. So that really spoke to us.
Have you found that since moving there, has it become a place where you feel you don't really need to leave? You don't really need to venture out? In other words, is the area feeling built up enough now to where it's got that community feel and you're like, oh, I don't need to go to Detroit to do this or that?
Yes and no. I would say, especially in the summer months, I think, it's easy to stay there because the bike trails, the walking trails, the lake are all kind of right there. So the outdoor activities are easily accessible. obviously they're still there in the winter, but you don't maybe do as many of those things. But as far as culture and restaurants, I mean, we have shopping. We have Meijer and Target, and, all of that is relatively close by. I'm spoiled. I'm used to downtowns. I lived in, Northville. So we had Northville, we had Plymouth. We were very close to Detroit. We do go to sporting events. And so in culture, just at the DSO for their holiday concert. So that we still do venture out for. But I mean, I really, as you asked the question, I wouldn't have thought about it that way. But I think it's more, we tend to venture out more in the winter and the spring months. In the summer, we stay a little closer to home.
It's seasonal. It's about what you can experience outside. That's fair. And speaking of Detroit, a lot of land has already been developed in and around the city. Why do you think we aren't seeing the construction of more apartments and townhomes closer to the city of Detroit?
I think in part, there's a variety of reasons for this, right? I mean, in part because most of the land is not vacant, so you already have something else there. So then that means you're repurposing an existing building, and from a cost perspective, does it make sense for someone? I mean, it may not. I mean, so you've got that potentially. If you've got a building that's sitting there that was zoned for one purpose, and now you're going to have to go through the rezoning, and getting the community behind you on something like that. And then let's talk about that, because you're right. There is a tremendous housing shortage. It would be great if we had multi-unit housing to start to absorb some of that. But you'll hear that phrase, NIMBY, right? Not in my backyard. Yep. It's great in practice. Oh, I don't want it near me. But it's great if it's over there. So I think to some degree, I mean, it's a multi-level challenge, because you've got municipalities that they have to be on board with doing this. The community really needs to support it. You need developers that can come in, and it financially has to make some sense for them as well. So it's really a multi-leveled challenge that needs to be solved by a variety of folks.
Sure, you need the developers who want to work with local officials and vice versa. What about inner ring suburbs like Hazel Park, Ferndale, Dearborn? If they want to keep growing, what kinds of recommendations would you have for them to try to develop more?
I think it's going to be the same thing. A lot of these communities, like you said, Detroit itself, and then you kind of get to the inner ring. They're all highly developed. I mean, you don't see open space typically in these areas. They've already got buildings on them. So now, how do we get creative? There's certainly some commercial buildings that have some vacancies. Typically, I don't know if there'd be old hotels that can be converted into apartments, and things like that. I think there's the ability to get a little bit more creative, but it is going to take, probably some people in the planning departments at the local communities to, retake a look at what the master plan was, because it might have made sense 10 years ago, but things have changed, and how can that now be impacted to get, current with what the needs are.
And we'll remind listeners, a master plan essentially is the driving document that any local community, their leaders will make that, and that is what they're supposed to follow then when it comes to things like community character. How do I want my city or town to look? So in 2022, the state of Michigan produced a report to create or preserve 75,000 units across Michigan. It suggested rezoning when necessary to do that. In other words, they want to create more density, in part because that makes it easier to build. What do you think the state should be doing to achieve that goal?
Oh, I think realistically, we didn't get here by one party or a political party, one entity that's involved in this process. And I really think it needs to be a group effort. I applaud anybody in Lansing or at the federal level that wants to try to address this, but they themselves are not going to be able to handle this. I do think it involves, kind of getting all relative parties at the table, whether those are some blue ribbon committees, whether that's some other things like that. Let's get everybody that's involved in solving this talking to each other, because it's easy to put out a press release. This is what we want to do. And again, it has to start somewhere. I'm not knocking that, but that isn't going to be the only way to solve it. You need to get parties talking to one another about what does this mean. Yeah, you're saying we can do some rezoning, or we're going to put an effort towards it. Well, what does the effort mean? Does it mean reducing regulation? Does it mean giving subsidies? Does it mean tax credits? What does it mean to everybody else down the line to make this happen? And I think those are maybe conversations that need to be happening a little bit more.
You're listening to The Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. We're speaking with Jeanette Schneider, president of RE/MAX of Southeastern Michigan. We're talking about where home construction is happening in Southeast Michigan. And right now, we're going to need federal dollars in order to build up. Whenever we've built large homes or homes in large numbers, it comes from support from the White House or Congress. Do you think that the Trump administration might do anything to build more around this country?
I'm certainly hoping so. I mean, I think there was signals during during his campaign. I said, I was surprised that, housing certainly was talked about, but I don't think nearly as much as I was expecting, given how important this is, to everybody. But I do think his administration understands there's a significant need for housing, and he is, has some real estate experience at his core. I'd like to think that he and a team he could put together understands that. I know where his mind tends to go is deregulation, which is helpful. I mean, because that adds price to a home. It typically adds time it takes to get to home or, homes, plural, built. But it is also going to require, some government subsidies, grants, tax credits, a lot of different things that can happen in that regard. And I also know that he's got a group of people looking to cut waste. So how are those two going to manage each other, balance each other out? I guess, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. And the state, we were just talking about this creative ways. The state wants to build more multifamily units, things like duplexes, triplexes, because developers want to make more money. But people want single family homes. Do our preferences need to change as a culture, as a society, to build more in this state? Or do we have to be more okay with duplexes and triplexes in these really creative ways? Or, what are we looking at here?
No, I think you hit on something that's really interesting, because I would say that, yes, I mean, culturally, if you want to say this is, the American dream is to own your own home. And for many people, in their mind, that is what you just said. It is my home. It is a single family dwelling, and I've got a little green around me, my yard, and, stuff like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you look at a lot of other, countries, they do build up more. There is multi-generational, in a house, there's multi-family units, like you said, duplex, triplex, things of that nature. And we do have bigger generations coming. Millennials are bigger than baby boomers. We've got, some bigger generations coming. The housing need isn't going to decrease anytime soon. And I think that maybe that is some things we need to start talking about a little bit, is what could homes look like? And especially maybe the entry level. There's nothing wrong with aspiring to have something, but, maybe if we can be a little more realistic on the front end of what that looks like.
I'm smiling right now because I'm like, yeah, some of us think, our first home, we need this giant, beautiful masterpiece of a home. And it's just like sometimes, maybe something small, just a little unit for yourself is okay, even if it is just a unit within other units and other spaces. So are you seeing a demand for aspiring homeowners for those smaller homes, or what are you seeing right now?
It is interesting, and I think some of this is price driven, is there has been a little bit of a trend, for not like the tiny homes, that we heard about, a number of years ago, but the footprint of a home overall getting a little bit smaller. And I think a lot of that has to do also with the cost to maintain a home, the cost to insure a home, everything else. I mean, if you can go a little smaller, not everybody needs a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath. It's okay. I mean, I started out in a 900 and some square foot house. We did fine. But I think you're right. And, some of it is just every generation wants to do a little better than the generation before. And so, there were generations in the past that were perfectly fine starting out with the do-it-yourself, we'll fix it up, it doesn't have to be big. Over time, it's become, well, I have to have, like you said, I have to have the full-blown palace as my starter home. And no, there should be options out there.
Yes, thank you. And earlier this week, this is my last question to you. Earlier this week, we spoke with Thomas Segru, an expert on the creation and maintenance of Detroit suburbs, and he had this to say about that.
Programs that began in the 1930s and 1940s set the expectations for what is risky or not risky, set the expectations for where people live or don't live, and basically harden the patterns of residential segregation by race that are still very deeply entrenched in the United States. It's been 100 years of federal housing policy, yet we can still see high rates of segregation in most of our major metropolitan areas, of course, including Detroit.
And whether people did it consciously or not consciously, the founding of the suburbs were exclusionary. So when we think about today and we see how folks are spreading out and we see how things are happening, are we still seeing that type of mentality, or are we just seeing people simply just moving away?
I don't disagree with what he said, and I don't know if it was conscious or subconscious. I think right now it's interesting because when the millennials started to become, homeowner age, there was a lot of anticipation and expectation that generation was going to be very urban based. They wanted to be in a walkable community. They wanted to be, they didn't want to have to drive. They wanted everything to kind of be very convenient. But what happened was they followed the same exact pattern that the generation before them had. Is I might start out there when I'm a young professional, and that's okay. But the minute I start to have kids, I'm moving on out, and they wanted the yard and all of that. And I think that, like you said, we've kind of talked about, I think perceptually that's what people envision when they say they own a home. And whether it's from, government, whether it's from, public policy, other things like that is, can we start to shift what people think about when they think about home ownership? This certainly isn't something that's going to change on a dime. But if it is something that as a country and as a community or as a state, we start to talk about a little bit more, is let's talk about what housing. We understand that there's a need for housing. Here's how we can solve some of it, but it's going to look a little different than maybe the last X number, the last several decades have looked like.
Oh, I love that so very much because it's so important that we let people know that it looks different for all of us. It's not the same. It's not a cookie cutter situation. If we are gonna in the space to own a home, it's gonna look different for some of us, and that is okay.
It is absolutely okay. There's opportunities out there, right?
Yes. Jeanette Schneider, president of the RE/MAX of Southeastern Michigan, a real estate firm. Thank you so much for joining us on the Metro. We look forward to talking with you soon.
Thank you again so much.
Coming up at 11, TikTok could be banned in the U.S., and it might happen as soon as the end of this week. Should TikTok be banned? How worried are you about China spying on you? Because that's where all of this is stemming from. What about your data from other social media apps? Are you concerned about how it's being used, what it's being used for? We're taking your calls. The number is 313-577-1019.
This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation.
That's the end of TikTok. I don't know what to say, honestly, because we've been threatened with this before, and the first time we thought it was real, it wasn't. The second time we thought it was real, it wasn't. I don't know if there was a third time because I don't remember, because we didn't think it was real, but then this time, it's looking real.
When TikTok gets banned, the app is still going to be on your phone. You're still going to be able to go into the apps. I've had people ask me where I'm going to go when the app goes away, and I'm still going to be here because the app's still going to be here. If you already have the app installed and then it gets banned or whatever, they can't delete the app for your phone. They can't do that. So they could do the thing where you open the app and then it doesn't connect. VPNs exist, and there are thousands of VPNs, and even the scammy ones that steal your data and whatever stuff, a lot of those still work.
You're asking me, the biggest problem is TikTok. It's not global warming. It's not access to health care, welfare, boring. Corruption at the top. Citizens getting shot. With all that's going on right now's the perfect time for banning TikTok, baby.
Well, it was nice knowing y'all. TikTok is getting banned officially. So where's everybody going?
Welcome back to the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham, and that's just a glimpse of my TikTok feed right there. Just a glimpse of it. The platform could be banned in the U.S. as early as this week. January 19th is the deadline that Congress gave the Chinese company ByteDance to sell TikTok, citing concerns over China's ability to collect and use data from the app's 170 million American users. ByteDance did not cut ties with TikTok, and the Supreme Court heard oral arguments for and against the potential ban last week. Here with us is the Metro's senior producer, David Lyons. Dave, you have been keeping an eye on TikTok, on this TikTok ban since it was pretty much announced. Where are we with the ban? How did we come about this? How do we get here?
So, I mean, really, it started in 2020. President Trump initially was like, we got to ban TikTok. This is a national security threat, and I got a problem with China. But then 4 years passed. President Biden eventually took up the mantle. Congress took up the mantle. They signed this potential TikTok ban last year in May in 2024. And basically what the bill says is that ByteDance, the China-based parent company of TikTok, would have to sell TikTok because Congress thought that there's a national security threat that's very real that's posed by ByteDance being based in China. Why is that? Because China is known for having access to all kinds of things, and there's not a whole lot of freedom to be spoken of when it comes to information and protection and censorship and privacy. So that was kind of the whole gist of it, is that China being able to get access to 170 million people's data all the time. The amount of information that's collected on TikTok is staggering, and our personal information is still this brand new world of who's protecting it, what can they do with it, and it seemed like too much of a risk. So Congress passed that, and then last week on Friday, the Supreme Court heard arguments for and against this potential ban, which if it is passed, or if the Supreme Court upholds that bill, it would take place on January 19th, which is this Sunday. The Supreme Court has not made a ruling yet. We're expecting one imminently. There's even been rumors flying around on social media, including TikTok today, that TikTok is really planning on this eventuality. We don't know exactly what's going to happen yet. We are on the edge of our seat waiting to see. But there's a good chance TikTok will get banned on Sunday. And what we were listening to there was a lot of TikTokers who are creators and influencers and probably spend a lot of time and energy and probably make some money, part of their income on TikTok, sounding off about what they think about it. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know for sure it's getting banned, which one person said. We don't know that you'll still be able to use the app, which is what another person said. Basically, there's a whole lot of speculation going out there, but we want to kind of unpack that today.
And it's really interesting, Dave, because, millennials, we've had social media with us since, high school, some of us, maybe middle school, but high school, college age. We had MySpace. We had Facebook, of course. We've had so many different things. Bebo. I mean, I can keep going with the social media sites that have come and gone, but a lot of them were never were taken away, or they were never pulled away through government means. So for the latest thing that we lost as millennials was Vine. Vine was a very popular app that we all used for a very long time. Then TikTok kind of followed along afterwards, which was Musical.ly first and then TikTok. But Vine was one of the ones that went away and disappeared. We no longer had it, but it wasn't due to government regulation. So I'm interested to know what this bill actually does say.
Yeah, we're looking to see how national security balances with free speech here. It's a really big one, not just because of the scale of TikTok, but because we've seen over the decades in the United States, national security has its moments where national security trumps usually other stuff. And in this case, one of the things the Supreme Court has commented on following those cases, and what people are kind of thinking is that ByteDance, because they're a Chinese company, they're not really entitled to First Amendment rights in the United States. And this all goes back, in my opinion, to Citizens United, which is about 15 years ago that was passed, saying that corporations have the rights of people, and that includes free speech. But even Citizens United couldn't save ByteDance in this case if it gets banned. So we're going to see what happens, but we have some excellent guests to talk about it today.
Super excited about that. Now, Robin, are you a TikTok user?
I am a begrudging TikTok user, Tia. I joined the bandwagon because I am a member of the press. I need to know what the kids are saying. As we talked about, we need to know what the kids are saying, what they're listening to, what they're talking about. But I find it to be a bit maddening, the pace of it. And after a few minutes of TikTok, I have to go and meditate.
And here I am, a doom scroller over here.
You love it.
I mean, I'm
what
a
do you
doom
love
scroller.
about it?
I've learned, I joined TikTok in 2020, most people did when the pandemic was at its height and didn't have much to do. So I said, might as well join this app, this music app. Let's see what it is. And you know what? Changed my life. I learned so many different things.
Changed your life, you just said.
Book Talk, we talked about a little bit earlier with the Source Booksellers, Janet and Allison. She talked about Book Talk and how that brought people into reading. That helped me get into reading during the pandemic. I also learned
TikTok helped you get into reading.
It did. Book Talk. If you go to Book Talk right now, it's there. And it has this list of like sci-fi and all the things that I love about, that genre of books. And I've learned so many different authors because of that. I mean, it goes to makeup, hair, baking. I've learned how to do baking tips from there. So it's not just this place where people are going to sound off on things. I truly use it as a place to learn, kind of how people use YouTube. I use it almost as a YouTube to learn things and to see how people are using products and different things like that. So I'm interested to see how others interact with TikTok as well.
I have to say, I don't use TikTok. I'm not one of the people that got the app in 2020. And most other social media apps have fallen out of my daily usage, but I did once use Facebook regularly. Twitter once was using regularly. Instagram. I was there for most of those, but I'm a 35-year-old millennial, so eventually I just kind of lost. I think there's too much attention required, and I just don't have that. But I really appreciate the fact that TikTok seems to support people's curiosity about hobbies and about the world. And Tia, you're not the only one. A lot of people will share something with me, and I'm like, man, that's really cool. I'm going to try that. Where'd you hear about that? And they're like, oh, I saw it on TikTok. I'm like, dang. Even though I'm not using TikTok, I'm learning from stuff that goes through TikTok. And so with this ban, personally, I'm not going to be sad in my own life about it. But that has nothing to do with the social implications for society. Like, it won't affect my life personally that much, but I'll get less great information from you and from my other friends. But I am curious for our listeners, for people who are out there who do use TikTok, what's this going to mean for you?
Yeah.
You know, we're taking your calls today. We want to know, if you use TikTok, what are you going to do when this gets banned, if it gets banned? Or maybe you're someone like me who doesn't use TikTok at all. Does it matter to you that it's getting banned? How do you feel about this? And to me, a bigger question is about our security of our data in general. Cybersecurity is a big deal. The United States and China have a very tense relationship, and it just keeps getting tenser. But we also know there's other world actors out there like Russia. There's hacking groups. It to me is such a big deal, and so much data is collected every day. So I'm excited to hear from our listeners how you feel about this potential ban that's pending, and I'm excited to hear from our guests.
Same. And like you said, we have a couple of great guests joining us this hour to help us unpack the cybersecurity, free speech, and social dynamics going on with the proposed TikTok ban. You all really looking forward to it. We're looking for your calls there, 313-577-1019.
This is The Metro on WDET. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Metro on WDET 1019. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. We're talking about the possible TikTok ban in the U.S. that could take place as soon as January 19th. That's the deadline that Congress gave TikTok to cut ties with China-based ByteDance, citing concerns over China's ability to collect and use data from the app's 170 million American users. The Supreme Court heard oral arguments for and against the potential ban last week. Arguments that pitted free speech against national security. So here to help us better understand the national security threat that China poses to the U.S. is Professor Richard Harknett. He's the director of the School of Public and International Affairs and the chair at the Center for Cyber Strategy and Policy at the University of Cincinnati. Professor Harknett, thank you for joining us on the Metro.
Thanks so much for having me.
So let's start with the reason for the proposed ban in the first place. TikTok's parent company is ByteDance, which is based in China. Despite the growing trade tensions, Americans still interact quite a bit with Chinese products and companies. Why does a company simply being based in China have anything to do with national security in the U.S.?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I'm thank you guys so much for having me to try to take a little bit of this complexity and deal with it. So why are we concerned? Why did Congress pass this law, right? Because this law is passed and it's being challenged in the Supreme Court to say, is this, unconstitutional or not? So, you had Democrats and Republicans come together on this. And the main concern is that China has a specific national security law that requires tech companies, both domestic and foreign, to share a lot of stuff with the Chinese Communist Party, the Chinese government. So they have to store their data locally. They have to provide access to their systems and their data upon request. They have to cooperate with the government if the government deems there to be a national security or national interest. And their definition of what might be a national interest is pretty broad when it comes to information. Where, like here in the United States, you have to jump through a lot of legal hurdles, right, for the U.S. government to get access to personal data, personal information, or a company's information. So there's this legal structure in China that puts ByteDance in sort of a very different place and space that concerned Congress, right? That the Chinese government can, under this law, force this company to give it a lot of access, including like its encryption keys and its source code that would get at the personal data that's flowing through these platforms.
So in other words, Professor Harknett, China can easily get to Americans' sensitive data from those who use the app.
I mean, that's the concern, right? So ByteDance, to be fair, ByteDance says, the Chinese government hasn't requested that. It's not, in a situation that the Chinese government is accessing its servers and the data that sits there. But the law requires it if the government asks.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we don't really know whether the government has asked, right? That's what the U.S. government's position would be, because if the Chinese government asked, they would be asking from a state secret standpoint, right? Like a national security investigation. And they're not going to be telling the Americans, oh, hey, we're going through your data.
Sure. So the Chinese government could potentially access this data under the guise of different requests here having to do with their own national security. What kinds of user data is built into the TikTok experience? How could that be deployed by China to harm or disrupt the U.S. and, maybe economically or politically or socially even?
Sure. So, you might ask, like, do the Chinese government really care what books Tia's reading, right? I think, Tia, right, you use this book talk
Yeah.
side of thing, right? So, like, at the individual level, like, is your book reading habits really a national security concern? Well, here's the U.S. government's view on this. Is that we have a very different view of the world and the relationship between citizens and their government, right? So, like in China, the individual serves the state, basically. That's what an authoritarian sort of governance structure is. And in the United States, we kind of empower individuals, right? And the government is supposed to serve them. So we have a very, very different sort of worldview. Well, if I'm the leader of China, I kind of believe in my worldview, right? Like that's my whole role as leader of China. And I know I'm in this competition with the United States. And so if somebody came along to you, Robin, and said, hey, look, I'm in the pockets of 170 million Americans. And on a daily basis, I get to know what they like and they don't like, what they hover on and what they don't hover on, what information is salient to them and what information isn't. And I as leader of China, I need to promote my country over, the United States. Why wouldn't I use that information? It would be the height of like leadership failure to turn around and say, but 170 million people's preferences and flows. Nah, I'm not really interested in that. So there's a base level, like I don't need to say that the Chinese are evil and the Americans are good. It's just natural kind of competition in international relations. If you have an ability to advantage your country, what we know over history is country leaders try to advantage their countries.
Sure. So then would you say that does this fit into the broader antagonistic relationship between the U.S. and China? In other words, is it or is it not that big of a deal alongside, let's say, President-elect Trump threatening tariffs, for example?
Yeah, no. So look, we are going to be the competition between the United States and China. These are the two countries that really can shape the direction of the 21st century, right? They have the economic capacity to do it. They have the technological capacity to do it. They have the military capacity. Like these are the two big players in international politics. And we have very different systems. And yeah, we're going to compete. And that competition doesn't mean that we're going to get into war, right? It just means that we're going to compete for our vision and our systems and our, economic values. So there's going to be an intense period. And so Congress came along and said, boy, we're really giving them a big advantage here by having a system that we have no control over, giving them the ability to collect massive amounts of data. And why is that important? Well, we're moving into a world of artificial intelligence, and the Chinese have a national strategy that they want to be the leader in the world of artificial intelligence. So one reason why this data flow might be interesting to them is if they want to sell more products to the United States, have economic advantage, the more data that you have about our behavioral preferences, like what do we hover over? Because TikTok not only like captures what you click on, it captures how long you hover, the milliseconds that you hover over a particular video versus just flashing through your phone. Mm-hmm. So that data helps teach AI to become better attuned to what it needs to get you to hover a little bit more, maybe to click, maybe to buy.
The algorithm has gotten so smart. You're listening to the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. We're talking with Professor Richard Harknett about the pending TikTok ban in the U.S. The app could be banned in the U.S. as early as this Sunday. Should TikTok be banned? Do you use TikTok? And are you worried about China's cybersecurity abilities? Give us a call. Let us know. 313-577-1019. We're going to turn to the phone lines right now. Ellen in Madison Heights, thank you so much for hanging there on the phone. How do you feel about the possibility of TikTok being banned in the U.S. this week?
Well, hello. I want to say thank you for taking my call. I'm actually more concerned over Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg's questionable intentions behind his active role in lobbying for the removal of TikTok. I will say we can speculate about ByteDance, about what they're doing with our data, but we know for sure that our data is not safe with Meta. And I am very concerned over the fact that Meta holds such a cultural dominance over the way that we communicate with each other, because it's not just Facebook. Keep in mind, Meta owns Instagram, Messenger, WhatsApp. I personally do not have a Facebook account, but at the same time, I'm expected to use Facebook Messenger for things such as volunteer groups. I've had to make it for past jobs that I've had. My brother currently lives overseas, so as a family, we use WhatsApp to communicate. That's where my concerns lie.
Mm-hmm. Ellen, thank you so much for giving us a call, letting us know what you're feeling about the TikTok ban and possibly, what does it mean overall for us in all of our social media sites, especially when we see that this Mark Zuckerberg, almost used his colloquial name on social media, but Mark Zuckerberg owns Meta as well, like you said, WhatsApp as well. We have Threads now. We also have Facebook and Facebook Messenger. So, Professor Harknett, Meta, YouTube are thought to be the big winners if TikTok gets banned. How much of this potential ban is political versus based on national security?
Yeah, no, you can never take the politics out of it, Tia, and certainly there'll be some economic benefit initially. It depends on who. Let's just play out a scenario in which ByteDance actually sells. The other possibility is that we're pretty creative, and somebody can come along and create a new platform. The difference here is, well, let me go to Ellen's point, and I think a really good one is, look, all of this social media has broken down our notions of privacy. We're paying with our data. Like most everybody thinks, oh, I'm getting this free app, I download it, I'm using it. The way you're using it for quote unquote free is you're giving them access to your data. I don't know about you guys, but most people don't read the terms of agreement.
No.
Right? And you just, and if you read those terms of agreement, you're giving lots and lots of people access to your data. But if I coach women's high school soccer on the side here, besides being a professor, and I ask my incoming freshmen this question all the time. It's like to try to teach them about cybersecurity. I said, like, if your parents said, "Hey, look, I'll give you a free phone. You don't have to work for it. You don't have to contribute to it or anything like that. You just got to give me access to your texts every day." There's not a high school kid.
Absolutely not.
It's a no for me.
Don't need that phone.
That, right?
Yeah.
But you're giving access to your texts every day to a third-party vendor that you have no idea what they're doing with that information.
When you put it that way, I'm looking at it totally different now. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So we're buying this stuff, right? And Ellen is right that we should be concerned about all of these actors. But let me answer Ellen why is TikTok in a separate category? There was a thing used to be called, well, it still is in radio, Voice of America.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
But during
owned
the
by
Cold
the government.
War,
owned by the American government.
Yeah. And during the Cold War, when we had the Soviet Union and the United States, we had Voice of America radio beaming into the Soviet Empire to convince them that their way of life wasn't very good and that our life was better. And the Soviets spent enormous sums of money to block those radio signals, to confiscate radios, et cetera, right? And when the Soviet Union collapsed, Voice of America's impact was pretty profound because people actually woke up the next day after communism collapsed and they had an idea that there was some alternative, some other place to go, right? And we saw Eastern Europe and even Russia itself move in a democratic way. So shaping messages to populations over time can have big impacts, right?
Yeah.
But the difference was that was one-way communication. We were trying to figure out, like, what does an East German want to hear about the United States, right? And we sent a radio signal across. The Chinese government they understand what we like and don't like. That's what the U.S. government is concerned about. That's the U.S. government's case in front of the Supreme Court, right? Like, they can get down to the details that shape our behavior. And look, we know we disagree over the future of Taiwan. And the future of Taiwan could lead to a crisis or a war. There is military planning in the United States that thinks that China may want to go to war with us over Taiwan. So is there subtle messaging that you can push? And that's the difference with TikTok, is it pushes information our way. Latest data is that it is the number one news source, Not that you guys aren't really important news sources, but the number one news source for 19 to 28-year-olds is TikTok. TikTok as news source. So again, if I've got that kind of access, boy, I'm going to be really, really, there's a lot of incentive for me to shape message. And you don't see negative messages, about communist China in that platform. It's not an even playing field. There are over 70 top-ranked websites that are literally banned in China right now. Google, YouTube, Facebook, Reddit, Instagram, WhatsApp, LinkedIn, Tumblr, Pinterest, Signal, Dropbox, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal, right? So China spends a lot of time shaping its information space and literally blocking, all of these information flows into their own domestic audience. So, the U.S. Congress is coming along and saying, hey, since we don't know where this data goes, and you guys, ByteDance, we gave you plenty of time to give us a better sense of your source code and, where this data sits, and you didn't, so there's a way out for TikTok, right? There was, in the law, there was ways to avoid the ban. But that's what we're facing come January 19th.
Professor
decision
Harknett,
not to go that route. Yep.
Yeah, I just want to get to us because we're running here at the end now.
Sorry.
This is no worries at all, because I am so interested. Literally, TikTok is what I use on every regular basis. So this is very interesting. Let's turn to U.S. cybersecurity now before we let you go. There have been a number of high-profile ransomware attacks on the U.S. companies in recent years. One shut down main oil and gas pipeline in the eastern U.S. An entire healthcare system's digital records were down, and car dealership networks were also hit pretty hard, just to name a few. These attacks from hacker groups expose significant weaknesses in U.S. cybersecurity. So what does this tell us about what needs to be done on our end to make sure that our cybersecurity is protected?
Yeah, well, that's a whole other show, T. But I'd be happy to come back. But I'll give you it in a nutshell. We realized that we were losing ground. When I say we, the U.S. government, but I played a role in helping some sort of shift our strategy. And we have a new, more proactive approach, what we call persistent engagement and defend forward. So we're not sitting back anymore and just reacting to incidents, but we're getting out there and using our own capabilities to try to discover and anticipate these exploitations before they happen, and getting better at managing them. So I'll give you one last one for your viewers. There was this thing called Volt Typhoon. It was a Chinese operation. They had compromised about 260 servers and IoT devices around the country. And what's public knowledge now, just happened a few months ago, the U.S. government was able to discover through its intelligence the Chinese server, and it got the Chinese server to delete all of its malware from these 260,000 compromised American devices. And you didn't even know that your device was compromised, and your device kept working fine, but the Chinese got kicked out.
And
it's real James Bond kind of stuff here.
Just like you just said, that's another hour. That's another show. That's another segment to talk about that, because as you're talking, my mind's just like, well, I need to know more. So Professor Richard Harknett is the director of the School of Public and International Affairs and the chair at the Center for Cyber Strategy and Policy at the University of Cincinnati. Professor Harknett, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro. We'll talk to you soon.
Hey, loved it. Take care.
We're talking about TikTok. Should it be banned in the U.S.? How often do you use TikTok or social media in general? What do you think about the fact that so many of these platforms are mining your personal data? We'll take your calls. The number is 313-577-1019.
Welcome back to the Metro on WDET-FM. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. We're talking about the possible TikTok ban that could take effect as early as this week. January 19th was the deadline Congress set in their bill requiring TikTok to cut ties with the China-based company ByteDance, citing national security concerns. TikTok's defense says the ban would be a violation of free speech for the company and the app's 170 million users. The Supreme Court heard arguments last week and is expected to rule any day now. So what would banning such a popular app mean here in the U.S.? On one hand, banning TikTok is an opportunity for juggernaut tech companies, Meta, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, to get TikTok users on their platforms more. On the other hand, it shows the power that the United States government has in regulating the media industry and therefore the attention of Americans.
If TikTok is banned, what does that say about censorship of other communication platforms? Is that too much power in the government's hands, or is this an appropriate use of power to protect all Americans? Here to talk about how a ban on TikTok in the U.S. could impact free speech, censorship, and democracy is Professor Elizabeth Stoycheff. She is the head of the journalism program at Wayne State University and a media communications and journalism scholar focused on social media and democracy, censorship, and disinformation. Professor Stoycheff, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So let's start with the issue of free speech. If a post is deemed unsafe for some reason, it might get taken down. Users are banned all the time, but if an app like TikTok is banned, the whole thing, does that equate to a form of censorship by the U.S. government?
So this is really the first time that we've seen such a large app facing such a penalty. And it really comes down to what you've been focusing on this segment, which is the ownership of ByteDance, which is a foreign entity. And the concern there is that does that foreign entity have First Amendment protections? Are they entitled to free speech in the United States? And it's looking like the Supreme Court is indicating no, that they do not have free speech protection in the United States. Now, in the U.S., we have large organizations like the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, who are saying that this is a violation of free speech because the threat to our national security is not severe. It's not imminent. It is very hypothetical. And so they're saying it's not enough to justify the suppression of expression on this platform.
And it's so interesting because, once again, I'm a user of TikTok. I use it every single day. Everyone's talking about it on the app right now, within the app, of the impending doom of TikTok this Sunday. And one of the things that I've been seeing so much is the use, or a large amount of TikTok users are running to the Chinese app Red Note. So it's interesting to see that happening.
Yes. So there's Red Note, there's Lemonade. There are a host of Chinese apps. China is an emerging leader in this space. For a long time, America was in its heyday with its media domination, and that's no longer the case. And so it'll be very interesting to see how this plays out, because are we going to develop an internet that is U.S.-centric? Other countries have done this, where they have kind of cut off apps and websites and internet content from other countries and become a very isolated intranet is what they call it, internet within your own country, rather than a global internet that connects people around the world.
And it sounds almost like a local newspaper almost, when you think about this. Like, we're only connected to one another within our particular country, and everything else we learn about what's happening outside either comes from other sources or whatnot, but it's not coming from this particular source that we have. It's very interesting to see how this is playing out. So we might lose TikTok this Sunday, but there are other apps possibly from China. We talked a little bit about that. What do we know about China's control of information and speech and social media compared to the United States?
So China has a very restrictive media environment. They are really held up as what autocracy can and should do. to retain power, to retain hold on power. Their primary motivation is to not necessarily restrict all speech, because that's impossible in a country with millions and billions of people, but to restrict mobilization. And so one of the issues here specifically is to limit social justice, limit political activism, and limit movements that would cause political unrest, political change, political opposition. That has been China's long-standing policy when it comes to regulating speech. Yes, they do have, the Great Firewall of China, and they do outright censor websites like Google and the New York Times. But when it comes down to the individual user and prosecution, they're not looking for speech issues. They're looking for that mobilization element. And that's something that I think is very foreign to Americans, because we have those rights and we take them for granted. And it's just something that comes with being part of an American living in America. And so I think this discussion about, potentially banning a foreign app is so novel to so many people. And in a way, the users and the content creators that I've talked to, it feels very unfair. I think because we don't really talk about that distinction between the domestic ownership versus the foreign ownership.
Yeah, yes. A lot of users and content creators on TikTok right now are just not okay with it, and this because the app is so much more than just what it's being portrayed as. But some would argue that one less social media app is good for our society. What do you make of that? Is less social media just better for society overall, or what are we seeing? What are the concerns there?
Certainly that there are problems with social media. There are concerns with the circulation of disinformation is one. Concerns about mental health, how young people are using social media is another. And how foreign entities may influence individuals is another. The interesting thing to think about when we think about our individual media consumption is that our media exposures are largely habitual. So I wake up in the morning, I look at my phone before I even get out of bed.
You're not supposed to do that, Professor Stoycheff.
You walk into potentially your kitchen or your living room, you automatically turn on your TV. You get in your car and your phone syncs and you have Spotify streaming. So a lot of our media exposures are very habitual. And social media companies like TikTok and all of the other ones benefit from these habits that we have developed. So have you developed any habits when it comes to your media exposure?
Don't put me on the spot. Professor, don't put me on the spot now.
How soon after you wake up, Tia Graham?
Oh, my Lanta. I would say, honestly, I would give myself at least 7 minutes, maybe. Okay. I'm being nice about that. I'm being really gracious with myself. Maybe 7, maybe 5.
10 minutes by the end of the week.
Okay. Challenge accepted. Okay. But yeah, I wake up and that's one of my routines is let's check the socials. Let's see what's happening on the socials. Is there any updates that happened over the night? Is there anything that I missed? Not even emails, let's check the socials. That's the first thing I think about in the morning. And like you said, the companies know that.
They know that and they benefit from that. Because if you actually stop and slow down and think about why am I checking this app? What is it that I actually need? I actually am in a rush this morning and actually should be doing something else, getting ready for my day.
Oh my gosh, exactly.
And so it's really the social media companies that benefit from a lot of the habits that we have. And so the interesting thing when an app is abruptly taken away, potentially like this, is that it disrupts that routine. And it gives us a choice. It gives us a choice to think about how we're using media. Are we using it in a way that serves us and our needs? Yes, TikTok and other social media platforms can absolutely be used to serve our needs, for connection with other people, to form community, to be informed. Those are all very legitimate ways to use social media. But is it I'm using this kind of unconsciously, mindlessly in a way that is serving TikTok and not me? Yeah. And in a way that all of a sudden I am scrolling through it. Now I have content in my shopping cart because I I'm being affected by this habitually rather than choosing.
Yep. Oh, 100% stuff in my TikTok cart right now. You're listening to The Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. We're talking about the pending TikTok ban in the United States. Last year, citing national security concerns, Congress passed a bill requiring TikTok's parent company ByteDance to sell TikTok to a U.S. company, or the app would be banned. ByteDance didn't sell the company, and the Supreme Court heard arguments for and against the ban on January 10th. And this has us wondering to you, our listener, should TikTok be banned in the U.S.? Do you trust big tech companies to protect your data? If you use TikTok, where will you go to instead? Call and let us know. The phone lines are 313-577-1019. We're joined by Professor Elizabeth Stoycheff of Wayne State University. Professor Stoycheff, let's talk more broadly about social media use in the U.S. We've seen time and time again that social media is a powerful tool for political organizing. And beyond the U.S., we saw that. We saw that with the Arab Spring in the Middle East more than a decade ago. We saw it in 2020 right here in the U.S. and worldwide with the Black Lives Matter movement after the murder of George Floyd. Many of us also turned to social media to watch the January 6th insurrection on the Capitol as it unfolded in real time. Many of us watched with horror. I'm curious how you view the role of social media and activism, both here in the U.S. and then abroad as well.
Sure. So social media has followed a somewhat predictable pattern when it comes to advocacy and political movements. So whenever there is a new technology, people on the ground, advocates are usually the first to adopt it. They're grassroots movements. They adopt the technology quickly and adeptly and use it to rally community, to shed light on injustices. And shortly thereafter, government and politics, political leaders become savvy at learning how to also use this technology in a way to divert the messaging, to have messaging that reflects their own agenda. And so what we see is kind of a continual turnover in these technologies that once a government, what we're seeing right now, becomes effective, whether through an outright ban or maybe through a more softer means, like adopting it for its own PR purposes, then it leads the way for new technology to emerge and take that space where individuals are going to be more likely to move to a different platform where they can have more ownership of it and use it to connect with other people who are wanting to mobilize.
So people will find alternatives to TikTok, but is there a concern, though, that a ban then opens the door to other bans, in turn creating a chilling effect for free speech?
Certainly. I think what the precedent is set here this week is going to be very important for the future of the global internet and any foreign app that we see come in. Which is very limiting as a U.S. consumer, that we're only going to be consuming apps, we're only going to be consuming digital content that's made in America. There are certainly concerns with that.
Yes, because then that is putting more of the power back into these companies, which are already some of the most powerful in the world. We're talking about Meta and Apple and Microsoft. So we're at a point where we haven't seen this kind of concentration of power and wealth since the Gilded Age and the Industrial Revolution. How will the Supreme Court's ruling in the TikTok ban case affect the balance of power between the U.S. government and these big tech companies who are already huge?
That's a really good question because we don't know yet what that would look like. What we do know is that the technology companies are far larger than broadcast print media in the past. So there has always been concern about media concentration, both within radio, television, print publication. But what we see, the concentration of power, of voices, of ownership in these tech companies is just far beyond the scale of that. And so it is concerning, and it will be interesting to see if and how that's regulated in the future.
I'm wondering how you talk about this with your students.
So that's a great question, because I am actually headed to class this afternoon to talk about the TikTok ban. A lot of my students are very anxious, very concerned about the ban on TikTok, very confused. Like I said, a lot of people feel like it's unfair because, first of all, it feels like there is no imminent national security threat. This is a very hypothetical threat. And secondly, it's because American tech companies are allowed to collect virtually the same data. And so the idea that there are very little privacy regulations for the individual user, and that somehow this applies only to TikTok. And TikTok is a platform that I prefer, or that I use the most, or where I have the most followers. And so it feels like people are being unfairly penalized for using this platform, when really the data collection practices are endemic in the tech industry. And we need to take a hard look at what this means for user privacy and user protection moving forward.
Elizabeth Stoycheff is the head of the journalism program at Wayne State University and is a media communications and journalism scholar focused on social media and democracy, censorship, and disinformation. Professor Stoycheff, thank you so much for joining us on The Metro.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And we want to shout out to Chris, who gave us a call. He's switching to Blue Sky from TikTok, so that's an anticipatory switch, perhaps. Tomorrow on the Metro, does Detroit have a marketing problem? How should the artists, musicians, and the city as a whole be marketed to make the city's creative industry thrive? Or will that mean Detroit loses some of its soul?
Let us know. Open WDET app on your phone, hit the open mic button, and let us know right there. This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation.
Thanks for listening.